Cause the blue bottle blues when you wake up in the night. Don't make a big mistake, cause you can never make it right. When you reach out for the vial, feel the ridges in the glass. It's a matter of survival, baby, better watch your back. There is no antidote. 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 There is no antidote.
Hello, peculiars. Oh my goodness. It's been so long. And I'm back. And tonight is my book. It's my book, Davey. This is very exciting. Where are you? There you are. Davey? There he is.
I'm here. Hello, everybody. Sorry, I was doing things with the graphics and things. Yeah, it has been a while. You know, you think the month off, I'd be like, oh, I can catch up and get ahead on so many books. Of course not. Of course, no. I was like listening to the final chapters this morning, of course. But, you know, we made it. We made it here.
We made it. We made it here. And it's good to see everybody. I see lots of people in the chat. Oh, my goodness. Lots of our regulars. It's so good to see everybody. And we have a special surprise because it's really hard for me to interview myself. So we decided to bring in another guest and have an authors hosting author kind of night. And so we want to welcome Eric Garcia, who was on for We're Not Broken a couple seasons ago.
Hi, everybody. This is kind of cool. I'm really grateful that Brandy would invite me to do this, would invite me to take part in it. I enjoyed my time at the Peculiar Book Club, and I really enjoyed the opportunity to, and I'm really enjoying this. I'm loving this opportunity to host Brandy in what I feel like is such a fascinating, pardon my French, peculiar time.
Peculiar times. Yeah.
Where history and the present are rhyming. And I want to start by saying what's funny is that I was supposed to go to Brandy's event
in DC.
In Washington, DC. And then what had happened was I had to stay back at work late at night because I'm actually talking to you from the third floor of the U.S. Capitol right now. Because they were working on trying to pass the Republican spending bill. What was funny is that they were waiting on the final last minute changes. And then when I was going through them, somebody on social media flagged that they had changed because the initial part of it, and this is important, this is relevant, and I'm telling this story because it's important, is like they had changed it because the initial bill had initially banned gender-affirming care for minors on Medicaid.
Right.
And then what had happened is in the final, somebody flagged on social media for me because I'm bad at reading legislative text sometimes, even though I'm supposed to read it. I was looking at what people were saying on social media. Somebody flagged on Blue Sky that they had struck the words "for minors" so that it was going to be so that it would apply to everybody,
much broader, right?
Adults as well. And then, literally today, this morning, Brandy, I'm sure you saw me posting.
I did.
That the Senate parliamentarian announced that part can't be included in the final Senate text because it is a policy change, not a budget change. And the reason why I'm telling you this story, and the reason why I know it sounds super fucking nerdy, is because we are talking about a fantastic new book called The Intermediaries, a Weimar story, which is the story of shit.
Yeah, see, it's like this is what Davey does behind the scenes.
That's great. I love that. Which is an incredible book about that I was reading. I couldn't put it down this weekend. Of course, I do it at the last minute. I read something on the last minute over the weekend.
Don't we all? I mean, really.
Final chapters, like as I was getting ready and today, and I couldn't help but say that this is a great book. It is incredibly relevant today. And, Brandy, you and I were talking about this just before we started, that like you were kind of wondering when you were writing this book that like, did you kind of you would go up to Mark and
Oh
you
yeah.
would say,
Yeah. Cause I would basically like, I know now the book is done and we see where we all are, but imagine I was writing it while all this weird stuff was happening. And so like I would read the book and literally have a moment where I would come out of my office and look at Mark after checking the news and be like, did I make this happen? I just wrote about this today. So it's so uncanny, and it is so Kathleen, she's here at a live event. Hey Kathleen.
"Hi, Kathleen, how you doing?"
And Ryan's here too. Oh my gosh. I saw Lorelai write, "Yay, surprise Eric." But you're right. It's like the laws, this way in which you just described, the way like the laws almost, but then kind of, and then back. That's just exactly what happened back then too, over and over. Yeah, Leanne's here too, from Denmark. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's very late there.
Yeah, it's that was kind of the thing that I wanted to take away from this, is that like I couldn't help but feel just notice how we're discussing the same stuff all the time.
Yeah, again.
And I think that this goes to the next thing, and this goes to my first question to you, which is this book started, and I think it's one of the first things I read by you, and how you and I started interacting on social media, when we kind of became internet friends and then became real life friends. I read this piece you had done for the Scientific American about Magnus Hirshfeld's. And for those who don't know, this is a fantastic book. It's about Magnus. It's about really the first transgender clinic and first LGBTQ and queer clinic in the world that was based in Germany and happened during the Weimar era, which is the in between. And I love the term. I love that it's called the Intermediaries, because obviously that was a term that Magnus Hirshfeld used for trans people and queer people, just judging because of the restrictions of language at that time, and also because the Weimar has come to be known as an intermediary time.
Yeah.
But I want to kind of challenge that a little bit, because I remember reading an article many years ago by a Weimar, and they interviewed a Weimar historian about the best books to read about the Weimar. And the historian, and the name escapes me, I should have done the research earlier, but it was like, we tend to, when we read about the Weimar Republic, look at it as like, because we know how it ends with the rise of Hitler, and you actually open, and I love the way you open this book. You open it with the closing of the Sexologists, and the burning of the books. The thing we all see. You see a lot on social media now, and comparing and contrasting today with the modern day. But it's a mistake, and this as a scientist and as a journalist, it's a mistake to look at history retrospectively. You have to look at it at how it was thought of at the time, and I think that's what I want to. That's what I love about it. It very much puts the Sexualwissenschaft, and I'm sure I'm bastardizing that pronunciation, squarely and firmly in its time, and shows that this didn't have to be a failure.
That's right. I mean, and this is one of the things that I really hope people take away. I've been on book tour, and I've said this at every single event, that this is actually a story of hope.
Yes.
Because the Nazis were never a foregone conclusion. They look that way now, but in fact, there were multiple times when it looked like we were about to tip, and they weren't going to be able to take power. And there's at least three points in the book legally where it almost happens, and then there's 2 points in the book culturally where it almost happens, and it comes right down to the wire. I mean, even up until 1933, it still looked like the Nazis were not actually going to get their way. So I think, one of the things that worries me a little bit because we know this history is that, and because like you said, history doesn't, I think it was Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. But in this case, there's not a lot of adaptation going on. They're really kind of sticking real close to that original playbook. It looks so close. But that doesn't mean that the Nazis win, and I feel like sometimes people feel overwhelmed because they're watching things happen now and they know how things played out before and they think that's just it. That's just the way it is.
That's what I want. That's what I want to go to and that's what I want to say, because I think that right now people are seeing what's happening with transphobia and with laws that are criminalizing
and misogyny as well. I mean, let's get that in.
and
ableism, all the hates
and all of these things. And I think because we see what happened almost 100 years ago now.
100 years ago, basically.
That we tend to think, oh, well, this is exactly what's going to happen. This is exactly what's going to go on. And we're going to end with the camps.
Yeah. And of course, and I think the fear is not necessarily misplaced, but the feeling that it's a foregone conclusion and that there's nothing we can do, that's the thing that you have to fight against. I just wanted to say, Kathleen's been talking about the way this book smells.
Yes. No, it smells great. It smells
so many people have commented on on the paper. Leanne, I think you did too. I just saw Leanne in the chat here.
I love when Leanne says it's not a rhyme in time.
Not a rhyme in time.
It's a duet as viewed with the time machine.
Nice.
And so I want to go to the question every author.
I was just going to say, we definitely need a poll at the end of the year for the best smelling peculiar book. That's definitely our season finale show. Yeah.
That is a really good idea. Ryan said he's reading the hard copy. Sadie listened on audiobook. Oh, and we can't forget to do the announcements too.
Yes, I was going to jump in and do the announcements.
It's so hard because you get going.
All right. So before Eric goes off with his next great question, because he has plenty more in the tank, I promise you that. You can meet us on all the socials. Facebook group is really strong. Blue Sky is where you can see us a lot now. Eric, I gotta fix my algorithm on Blue Sky because I used to pop up all the time on Twitter. Like I used to see your stuff constantly, and I loved it. And now my algorithm on Blue Sky, I messed it up. I clicked on too many starter packs.
Yeah, me too.
I gotta figure out how to do it. So find us on all the socials. We are also in so many great places. Goodreads. We're on the podcast feed. You can support us on Patreon, YouTube, of course. That's where you're watching this. And like we said, the group on Facebook. The newsletter. Not only do you get to stay up to date with what's going on in the show, but you also get fun little writings from Brandy, of course. Who doesn't want that in their inbox? So make sure to subscribe to the newsletter to stay up to date on everything happening here. The Patreon. If you want to be part of our VIP shows, if you want cool swag with cats on it, you got to sign up for the Patreon. It helps support the show. It helps keep this little adventure going. So please help us out for as little as $5. You get to be part of all those VIP shows live. And the thing you've all been waiting for, the book Cocktail. The winner in a landslide decision was Frisky Whiskey's Pride Cocktail. A bourbony, a whiskey drink. Looks a fruity whiskey drink too.
It's kind of like a sour, but it's got some interesting other flavor profile notes, except I forgot there's a rosemary sprig on my counter that I forgot to put in.
I love the photo. She's got the glass on the book. There's a coaster in between. There's a coaster in between, but she's using the book to prop up the drink. So yes, definitely. That's a good one for Brandy's book. And speaking of podcast feeds, the Peculiar Movie Club is still going strong. We did our May episode. It came out in early June, but our May episode, Sherpa, I hope you all got to enjoy that. It was a really interesting to do a documentary instead of kind of a Hollywood film. We're going back to Hollywood for Brandy's book. And in honor of Brandy's book, we're going to do the movie Milk, starring Sean Penn, which came out a few years ago. And I have a feeling, I haven't seen it yet, so I love going in cold to this. I have a feeling we're going to discuss very similar themes in a different decade, in a different generation. So that's going to be an interesting movie to pair with Brandy's book and see what themes alive. So stay tuned if that'll be late June, or early July. That'll be our June movie for the Peculiar Movie Club, which of course is in your podcast feed, along with the Peculiar Mystery interviews that Brandy has been doing and all sorts of great content. So even if you watch us on YouTube, make sure to subscribe on the podcast as well. All right, Eric, back to you.
Awesome. And I love that the club, if I can kind of harp on this, because I think it's really relevant. And so those who don't know me, I grew up in a very Christian conservative environment, and I went to Christian schools. I remember my senior year of high school, I was growing up in California. This is around 2008. I remember my teacher, a guy by the name of Mr. Juarez, he told us to tell our parents to tell Governor Schwarzenegger not to commemorate Harvey Milk Day, because we should not commemorate a homosexual who was just because he was a homosexual. And I think about that a lot, and I think that what I'm trying to say is that we see a lot of these same trends in the past, and what we see, and what's fascinating to me, for those who don't know anything about the Weimar Republic, is that I believe it gave women the right to vote before the United States did, or at least around the same time. It talked about equality and it talked about democracy. There was, you go into wonderful detail about Weimar era Berlin. Those who don't know about Weimar era Berlin, or who just know it from the book, you should watch documentaries about it. This is where jazz becomes a big thing. This is where there's drinking, and there's free drugs, and there's free love and sex.
It is it is the Roaring 20s, right?
Yeah, it is
kind of. Well, actually, no, it's Roaring 20s, 30s.
Yeah, and so what I want to do, and so the thing that fascinated me is that I couldn't help but think about the present now, is because we're about last week was the 10-year anniversary of Donald Trump coming down the golden escalator. And what was interesting to me was that, if you remember, in 2016, when Trump was running for president, he basically said he didn't mind trans people using the bathroom of their choice. And now he's gone all in on transphobia. And I think that what is interesting is and then around, if you remember, like the last decade, there was increased visibility for trans people. Today is the 10-year anniversary of Obergefell v. Hodges. Fellow Ohioan Jim Obergefell. And I remember people feeling like, well, transgender people are next. Like, they're the next group of people that are going to get rights.
It did look that way for a short time.
And Vice President then, Joe Biden, said this is the next civil rights issue of our time.
And you can understand why. I mean, it's really interesting to me, because one of the reasons that I think one of the reasons that you have why the right gravitated towards going after trans rights so hard is partly because of something that happened in the UK.
Yes.
And then the UK itself, like, as much as you hear about there being a lot of TERF action and J.K. Rowling's funding people to do not nice things to trans people, etc., it's not in the same place as it is here. Like, it's a conversation happening. It's kind of like a really loud minority, and so far hasn't stuck as much in their government as it has here. But someone explained to me, they were like, well, we had made gay marriage okay, so therefore they had to go after something that would like be the next big, they had to put a block. They were like, oh no, we can't have this, we can't have rights being shared around with everybody. And so in a way it becomes like that it's their trash fire that they threw in the road to try and stop any more rights from going on. And it makes sense, because the more you give rights, the greater progress moves ahead. The more these outdated, very siloed right-wing perspectives seem incredibly out of date. And so if you're one of the people in those right-wing silos, you have to have a throwdown, and it works best when you can attack somebody and make people think they're scary. And so that's exactly what they did. That's what they did 100 years ago, too. They did the same kind of thing. We have a loud minority in gerrymandering. Yeah, that's about right, Amanda.
Yeah, and that's what I want. That's what I want to go to. And forgive me, like I was kind of rambling and info dumping. And so that goes to this point, is that there is, I think, whenever there's to your point that, well, they need somebody to demonize. I think a lot of very idealistic people think, to your point, that this is the natural trajectory, that like, well, they needed to find someone. The flip side to, well, they need to find somebody else to do it. I think a lot of very idealistic people is like, okay, well, because we think about like how the suffrage movement began after the emancipation of slavery in the United States. And we think, oh, well, it makes sense. After black people get the right to vote, women get the right to vote. What we forget, and unless you know the history, is that the women's suffrage movement employed very racist tactics.
They did, and those were true in the Weimar too, actually.
Yes, and that's what I want to say, is that where there is progress, there's typically backlash.
Yeah.
And I think that, because like, again, I'm thinking about, like, I remember in 2016 when North Carolina did the bathroom ban and the NCAA pulled out. I remember telling my editor at the time, oh, the Republicans just lost it because basketball is religion in North Carolina.
Right.
And I think that's what I want to go to, is that, like, talk with me a little bit more about that kind of push-pull, because the fascinating thing when I read about Hirshfeld is he's thinking very much, Magnus Hirshfeld, who really is the protagonist of this book, he's thinking long and hard about the politics of this, of promoting acceptance. So talk with me about those kind of struggles he had at the time.
Yeah, well, I'm going to also pop up Sareka's question here because I think it's related. And it's the two kind of wrap around each other a little bit. So a really quick overview of Hirshfeld, because Hirshfeld himself is, he's a gay man. He's a gay Jewish man, except he's not out. And so one of the things that's, when we talk about push-pull here, there's push-pull inside of Magnus Hirshfeld as well, because he wants rights for his own reasons, but he also wants rights because he's watching young people commit suicide and all sorts of bad things happen. And he wants to stop that from happening. And he wants all of them to be accepted. And he then realizes that the only way for him to do that is to do it as a straight white man, or, well, he's Jewish, but a straight Jewish man, but in a way he has to use the illusion of fitting into society's norms as a screen to help emancipate other people. And it's a very, very interesting, I mean, there's a push and pull in society, but there's also this push and pull right inside of Magnus Hirshfeld. And he is at one time, like, very, he writes books about racism and how it's wrong and how it's bad. And at the same time, also kind of falls into social Darwinism a little bit. It's a complicated time, and it's so easy for us here to kind of make judgments that would have been very, very hard to draw lines around things at the time. But Sareka's question, for those of you who are on the podcast, she says, how do we begin to hate? Which is a question I ask in the book. And she says, are there lessons from Weimar Germany for preventing or rewriting stories that frame other people's differences as a threat to the self? And so this gets right back to what we were just saying. And this is a great question and a complicated answer that I will try to keep small, because I saw some other questions roll through here somewhere, I think. But anyway, the one thing is that it starts so much earlier. And I think people always have a tendency to assume the Nazis kind of jumped fully formed from the forehead of Zeus like Athena in 1933. And that isn't true. This all started in the 19th century. You know, you had, and it was a backlash to, you were pointing out backlash. It was actually a backlash in a way to industrialization, right?
Yes.
Because you have industrialization, meaning that there's changing roles of men and women, and there's women trying to get into the workforce. There's women wanting to be educated. And the original kind of backlash is very anti-woman. And this cult of masculinity rises up, particularly in Germany, and really gets a foothold in Germany in this culture, this idea of the Übermensch, right? The Superman, and the super masculine. Yeah. And they're so interested in masculinity that let's just see some comments over there. We'll come back to. They're so interested in masculinity that they literally are like, they call it the tyranny of womanhood. Women can't even vote yet. And they're like, oh, we must beware of the tyranny of women. Like, what tyranny?
Yes.
That's how much they were against it. And then what's interesting is, just as Hirshfeld is trying to, this is one of those ways, like I said, we come close to making rights happen like a couple of times. Just as he's like making those inroads and it starts to look really good, they start using it as a way of, they start saying gay men are too feminine and that's what's wrong with them. They're too much like women. And so they use misogyny to attack gay people and then to attack trans people. And then later they use it to attack Jews. So anti-Semitism is also rooted in this. I mean, anti-Semitism goes way back, but it also has, part of it is also misogyny, because the Germans claimed that Jewish men were too feminine and that they would
Yes.
feminize little boys. Like it was this really weird, almost like a pedophile, like they were sort of accusing them almost of like pedophilia, right? They're going to
Yes.
make your kids gay and more like women. And so the hatred that we arrive at in 1933, like Hitler didn't invent anti-Semitism. He didn't invent going after trans people. He used it as a weapon. He basically took all of these threads that had been kind of under the surface and he just yanks them all and he attaches this driven fear thing. And that's what we're watching the right do. Like right now with trans people, they're saying, oh, they're doing it to stalk women. No, they just have to pee. Honest to goodness. Like that's it. Like the scariest thing to me in a bathroom is like not having toilet paper, frankly.
Yeah. Totally. And you know, you talk also about the kind of what's kind of interesting about these kind of right-wing fascist movements is how they have gay people in their own ranks. You talk about the SS, the Sturmabteilung, and there's the famous, of course, people who know the history know the Night of Long Knives and the killing of Ernst Röhm. But what a lot of people forget is that Ernst Röhm was a homosexual, using the terminology there, they killed him because he was a homosexual. They killed him because he was gay.
Yeah. Even though they all knew he was gay the whole time. Like, so in a way, I wrote an article about this not too long ago where I was saying that, you know, it was a way of, they made it about gay so that then they could go after other people for that. But like, it wasn't really about that. It was because basically Ernst disagreed with Hitler about who should be in charge of the SA. And Hitler was like, you disagree with me? Okay, let's kill you. And we'll tell everybody it's because you're gay. And then they will do a sweep through and they go after all these other people. And so it's just another way in which it's so much, it's not really about trans people. It's not really about gay people. It's about power, you know?
I mean, a perfect example of this today is there are plenty of gay men in the far right movements. There are plenty of openly gay Republican operatives and far right figures.
Oh, sure. Oh, absolutely.
And it's not like the old classic kind of this person votes against gay people and then goes to their their secret gay lover. No, it's like it's openly acknowledged on very many circles of the right that somebody's not just closeted gay but openly gay, and then later it's used against them too.
Right. Well, and it's always the later thing. And this is, I just popped up. Kristen Meston asked a question because I think again this is another way of wrapping that up. She said, not quite sure how to phrase this, but do you think the history could have played out differently if it hadn't centered on just men at the start? And that's a great question because the group of people who ended up causing all kinds of problems for Hirshfeld and each other were the masculinists.
I love that part of the book.
It's so interesting. So it's a man named Adolf Brand, and I saw whose question was it down here saying their least favorite word was
Ubermensch.
Jennifer. Sorry, I'm doing it with you, Davey. Comment, I have a new least favorite word, Ubermensch. I had an allergic reaction to these manly men who think women worthless beyond reproducing. Ick. So the masculinists were like Friedlander, Adolf Brand. These are people who turn up in the book. By the way, I had great love and feelings for all of you who are reading it. So if you turn to the back, there is actually biographies of all the main people mentioned so that you can cheat whenever you forget who they are. But Friedlander and Brand were gay men who were basically saying, you know, men are the only people worth having relationships and sex with unless you want to have babies anyway. So they were gay, but they were against gay. They were against everything else. They were against any gay man who thought women had rights. They were against any gay man who thought that women were useful or interesting. They were against any trans person who, particularly trans women. They were against, you see what I mean? So they were like, we're okay. And they thought that they were going to be accepted by the Nazis. Because they were for a short time. This is another reason why Ernst Röhm, he was out. He actually wasn't even closeted. He didn't think that was going to be a problem.
No.
Until it was a problem. And then suddenly Adolf Brand and all these other Friedlander had died by that point, but all these other people who thought they were saved by their uber masculinity were not. So I thought that was a fascinating. And so if it hadn't just been this male focus, right? If it had been and I will say this, Hirshfeld was very teachable. He starts off not being particularly aware of women's issues, but he gets trained up. His own sister was a feminist, and Helene Stoker, she educates Hirshfeld a lot, and he ends up starting to expand that. But if early on there was a greater focus on unity and on gender unity and fluidity and that kind of stuff, and you didn't have this kind of masculinist group, but they were very powerful and very popular, splitting off. So instead of a unified front against the right, they kind of left Hirshfeld and his group high and dry and tried to make these alliances, which ultimately did not.
And that was the point that I wanted to go to, which is that I think you're seeing this now with the modern day right. One of the most fascinating things is that the leader of the Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio, is Afro-Latino. And one of the big trends that we've seen in the Trump era is Latinos, in fact, not just Latinos, but Latinas. Anybody who follows me on Blue Sky knows that I post a lot about the trends, the voting trends with Latinos and Latino men. But one of the biggest trends that's happened over the past decade is Latinas, not just Latinos, voting for the far right, voting for Republicans. Paulo Ramos has an incredible, great book about this called The Defectors, about the appeal within Latinos in the far right. Some of the biggest figures on the right and in Christian nationalism are Latino, they're Mexican-American, and it's not just...
And it's the way that religion has sort of become this cudgel, and that was true. I mean,
and that was what I was going to
do the same thing,
is that I think that when Soreka talked about how do we hate, the fascinating thing to me about it is that, of course, Germany is a very Lutheran and a very Catholic country. When it becomes a country, because of course it isn't a country initially. What are the similarities and differences with how religion is used and not used, used between today and back then?
I would say it's again, just like it isn't really about sex, it isn't really about religion either. It's definitely about anytime you have a group of people who want power against what is in fact the best interest of, and really even the best wishes of, the general population, one of the ways they get it is by striking a balance between morality and fear. I know I put this up earlier. Amanda Johnson said it's about co-opting the morals that are important to the far right, right? And it's like it's this idea that morals become religion, and morals are just a stand-in word for what we accept at this moment in time, and I like to use fashion for this, because I studied the 18th century, and in the 18th century men wore makeup and wigs and heels and tights, so it's what's acceptable right now. It's not really about anything in particular, and Ryan just said, are there any pictures of Adolf Brand? I'm picturing Russell Brand.
No, he has like this really great mustache.
Such a mustache.
Yeah. Davey, what's up, dude?
Oh, I was getting ready for the next break in the conversation. No, we're at the halfway point. I was going to jump in with some music.
Oh, that's right.
You made me think of Robin Hood Men in Tights. Tights.
It takes a real man to wear tights, remember?
Yes.
Takes a man to wear tights. I love that. Well, okay, so I think I've been trying to check all the questions. You guys can put more questions in there, and we're seeing them as they come up. Davey's starring them. This musical segment is actually a song that I had commissioned for the book, and I commissioned this song. So Maya Byrne, or Mimi Byrne, is a transgender musical artist. She's been featured in Rolling Stone. She does a lot of country music, country western music, which is an unusual place to be as a trans woman, and she's amazing. And I also had Susan Huang also helped, and so the two of them put together a song for us. And Susan, she's a claymation figure now. She's been on the show many times. So this is a song about Dora Richter, and because I am incorrigible, it involves stop motion as well. And so this was the musical video, the music I commissioned, and then I made the video about Dora Richter, who we definitely need to get to in the second half of the show.
That's what I'm going to get to Dora Richter, and I'm going to get to
all right, cool.
As well. So
joy, she wants wants to be held by a boy. Can't keep Dora down, she's gonna look her best. Go get that caress, put on a dress and go into town. She's gotta be loved, it's what her heart is made of. Hard to ignore a Dora who wants more, what life's for. Give her some room, there's flowers in bloom.
She sings and prays, stitches and wishes, weaving her world to a life that she owns. Aniline stains on her apron and fingers, pulling out crumbs for a purse for the birds. Growing as fast as she can, she's always her own girl.
Her mother prayed for a girl, her mother taught her to make lace. Who is to say what's a mistake or is it fake? Maybe life isn't what you find but what you create. Not something you wait for, no, not Dora, it's something she'll make. Every thread in its place like perfect lace.
She sings and prays, stitches and wishes, weaving her world to a life that she owns. Aniline stains on her apron and fingers, pulling out crumbs for a purse for the birds. Growing as old as she can, she's always her own girl. She's always her own. She's always her own girl. She's always her own. She's always her own. She's always her own.
Always alone.
She's always her own.
Come on. Come on, girl.
That was excellent. That was excellent. And what a perfect segue into the questions I wanted to talk with you about, which is about Dora Richter, because she is in so many ways, I don't want to call patient zero because of the connotations with that, but she really is kind of the canvas on which Hirshfeld paints.
Sort of. I mean, I would almost say that it's more like she's a teacher for Hirshfeld.
Yes, yes. Well,
she's
better.
a real teacher. Well, he starts off originally thinking that there's only what we would call trans women. That is people assigned male at birth moving towards the feminine. Because originally the terminology, and by the way, there's a huge glossary at the back of this thing too, because the terms kept changing because it keeps morphing over time. Originally they called them transvestites, meaning wore the clothes of the opposite gender, right?
Yes.
And they would get arrested. There was no actual law against this. So what they would arrest them under disturbing the peace. Yes. And again, it's this pressure of normalcy, right? Or normal. My mom used to say normal is a setting on a dryer. So she was this person who herself was she was born and christened Rudolph, but from the time she was 3 years old was about the age when they stopped making kids wear those like dressy things and put them either into dresses or trousers. So about 3 years old, they wanted to put Dora in trousers as Rudolph, and Dora just would not wear them. She was like, that's not my clothes. I belong in dresses like my sisters. And that was just this is someone very, very young who had this understanding that she was a girl. And this becomes only more and more apparent to her by the time she is 12 or 13. She actually tries to take matters into her own hands, and she'd seen her mom remove a wart by tying a string really tight around it, and then it fell off, and she thought that this might be a way of handling Yeah, I know. Ouch.
Every time you describe something like that in the book, I was like, oh,
I know. I know.
everything. There was more than just that in the book.
Like,
There was
cross my
more than just
legs.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, but essentially they stopped. That would not have caused. That would have just made a horrible infection happen. So luckily they stopped her from doing that. But that was her. She tried to commit suicide as a result of that, of not being successful. So you have this person who is very convinced from a very early age. She lives in a mountain town with like 100 people in it, maybe. She's never met a gay person. She was not learning transgenderism from TikTok, right? Like she was born this way. And so, you know, she was somebody who was definitely a trans woman. But this is the other thing that she taught. So originally Hirshfeld thought there were only trans women. Then he met Gerd Katter, who was a trans man, and he met other trans men, and he understood that was a thing. Then he thought that all people who were like trans women, transvestites, trans women kind of people loved women.
Yes.
Like he thought they all were sort of, and it's very strange because he thought that trans women loving women would be called straight in their culture, which is not how we would handle that. But anyway, it's very confusing, but essentially, and then here comes Dora, and Dora doesn't love men. She doesn't love women. She loves men because she thinks of herself as a woman, and she wants to be loved not as a gay man. She wants to be loved as a woman because that's how she feels herself to be. And you know, she ended up living a surprisingly joyful, joy-filled, and happy life, which is something that people just don't understand about that, you know. And well, I see. I was just seeing. Yeah. So Leanne asked, Dora Richter ended up leading a relatively happy and quiet life. Relatively happy. She has some exciting things happen along the way.
I was going to ask you, as the person who wrote all this and researched all this, did you need Dora in the book? Like, did you need someone who has somewhat of a happy ending, like in the book?
I have to tell you, I actually couldn't have written the book without Dora's story, which I needed Dora's intake interview. And I had just heard whispers that this existed. And I thought, okay, I really need this. So
for those who don't know, explain what an intake interview is.
Oh yeah, sorry. So when Dora has this really interesting life, actually. I mean, she lives mostly as a woman as much as she can. She ends up kind of having a double life. So she lives while she can, she lives as a woman. If she needs to get a job that only men can get, she'll kind of live two lives and things like that. But when she finally hears about the Institute, which that's a great story in itself, but when she finally hears about the Institute and she goes, the Institute was a remarkable place, okay? They did counseling, they did community, like they did job placement. They had such a notion of community. They would help people, you know, adjust. They did social training. They taught comportment for like if you wanted to become, if you were transitioning to a particular gender, they would like teach comportment classes on how to better do that. They had hormone therapies and surgeries. But they also had really a deep understanding of the mental processes and how difficult these types of things can be. So they had a lot of psychological health training. And so when you would go, they did an intake interview where they wanted to like really get your life history, really, really understand where you were, kind of make an assessment about you. And it was the only place where we get Dora's story, because Dora, unlike Christine Jorgensen or Lily Elba, she doesn't write her own biography. She's an incredibly shy, retiring person. She does not write her own biography. And so this was the only place. So I had to go to Berlin to get it, but it was COVID and it was a crazy time. Like I had asked them if they could digitize it and email it to me, and they said no. And they said that like I couldn't even send somebody to do it. I had to physically go there if I wanted to digitize it. And I've told this story in other places, but it gets really wild. Like I got there and then they told me I couldn't get a library card because I had to have a permanent residence in Germany. And I was trying to decide if I needed to buy a house or commit like a National Treasure Nicolas Cage theft and just steal it. It was a really, really weird time. But and like all sorts of technology things went wrong. And there was at some point I was just sweating and sitting on the floor of this reading room where other people were reading, and I was like, I don't know what to do now. But ultimately,
there's also
I
a
do get it.
classic librarian that's your foil in the story too.
Oh yeah. So
Yeah.
the library, first of all, it's on the 6th floor. Okay. So I had to keep going all the way to the 6th floor. And then she would be like, oh, well, you need something that's on the 1st floor. And I would go all the way downstairs. And then I would come back up and they'd be like, oh, you need this other thing that's on the 1st floor. And so this just kept happening. And I was wearing a wool suit and I was just like massive monkey pit sweat stains by the end of the thing. I was like the whole time I'm like, is it hot in here? It feels hot in here. But when I finally, the worst part of it was the machine. When they finally let me have the thing, the digitization machine wouldn't recognize my USB stick. And but they didn't sell USB sticks. So I had to like go wandering off into Berlin to try and find a USB stick. And then if you've ever been to a special collection, you know that you have to lock up your belongings. So like I walked clear like miles looking for a USB stick and an SD card, and I'd forgotten my wallet. So like it was just a comedy of errors, right? But I finally I come back, the USB still doesn't work. I want to put the SD card in, but I'm all sweaty. So I'm trying to open the package and it's not working. And the foil, the librarian says she'll open it, and she just she just rips the package and the thing just sails off the SD card, and it was it was this big. Anyway, I could have implanted it under my skin. We can't find it at all anywhere. Like I was literally underneath machines with a ruler pulling out dead bugs and paper clips and stuff, and like it was just nowhere. And that was the point at which I was sitting on the floor all sweaty, and I was like, I don't know what to do now. And she said, well, I could just digitize and send it to you. And I murdered her. She's dead, so I had to kill her.
Yeah.
No, I didn't murder her, but I actually my head spun around like 2 or 3 times, like, you know, in The Exorcist.
That leads me to so that's the story about how you're bringing it back to the US.
Yeah, just getting the story. But then that's not even the best part. When after my head spun around 3 times, she said, well, normally when the machine does this, normally, as in this happens a lot, not 6 hours of Brandy running around Berlin, we just turn it off and on again. So she did that, and then it started working, and she looked right at me, right here, and said, sometimes you just need enough despair in the air. And that's a real story that really happened to me trying to get this out of Berlin.
My goodness. And roughly what time of the year was this? Was this like March 2020?
It was right after the Ukraine thing went down. So there was also a bunch of refugees pouring in. And and I had mistakenly badly chosen my hotel right next to the Russian embassy. So when I got there, there was like razor wire and guns and stuff. And I had to walk by it every day with a lot of like really angry looking people. And it was a whole thing.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Oh my God. And I want to talk. So you talk about this. So like, what did you? I think that story about Dora and her not being a very private person. I think a lot of people think the thing that I always hear is, why do they have to put this damn stuff in my face? Most trans people I know. Are there some people on social media who are annoying? Yes.
But that's just true of social media in general.
I'm annoying on social media. But there are but the story of Dora is so important, because I think what it reminds me of is that there are just a lot of people who just want to be left the fuck alone.
Yeah, it is true. It is totally true. And this is what I love about Dora, right? Is that she's this incredibly unsinkable personality. She's so lovely. Like she just, I don't know. I'm assuming, I don't know how many of you have read the book already, but like, I hope you love Dora. Like she's just this sweet, kind. Yeah, she's so great. And honestly, Hirshfeld recognizes this too. When he meets her, she's been calling herself Dora, and he renames her Dorchen, which actually just means like my little Dora. It's this cute term of endearment, like she's just fatherly. So sweet. Yes. And, and her whole family really used her a lot. She got used. It's not because she was unintelligent. She was just guileless. Like she honestly wanted the best for everybody. And she always had this warm, friendliness about her. Sureka says Dora's lovely, heartbreaking stories in the middle. Yeah, it's true. She has some really awful things. One of the people fell in love with her. She got marriage proposals, and this was also heartbreaking because she had to run away from marriage proposals because she didn't want them to find out, you know?
Exactly. Like, I mean, I think that's I love this part from Amanda. My stepdad said that about being in his face. I explained to him that it's not trans people or LGBTQI plus people who are in his face. It's people who want him to be afraid of trans people. Yeah, no,
It's so
absolutely.
true.
And I think that
It is.
the real kind of lovely parts of the narrative is that so one of the things that's interesting is the thing that kind of fascinated me is earlier, I believe it was Amanda who talked about adopting the same kind of morals and values within the military with marriage, and the other one that comes to mind with me with gay people is the military. And I think what's so fascinating to me is how Dora and Christine Jorgensen are former are former service members, or former soldiers.
Sort of.
Sort of. I mean,
Dora kind of
gets
ends up
kicked
not.
out earlier.
She gets kicked
Yeah,
out.
she just doesn't fit in. And what's funny to me is that how, again, I live in Washington D.C., where if you go to any of the gay bars, like you'll meet a lot of U.S. service members, and there's a lot of trans people who serve in the U.S. military. And I think that what's so interesting is how many people I meet who are transgender, and I'm sure you see this, who try to perform, who don't. They may know in their hearts that they are queer, but they almost don't, but they spend so much time trying to perform femininity or masculinity as it is prescribed. That's what sticks out to me.
And I recognize it. I suppose as somebody, since I'm in the LGBTQ community, as somebody who is non-binary and gender fluid, and I'm autistic, to me it reminds me of masking. It reminds me of being forced to kind of like pigeonhole yourself into this acceptable niche that people want you to occupy. And what I try to express in the text is that this also gets in the way of our heroes, right?
Yes.
Dora is so attached to the ideals of her particular time period and what that means for femininity, that all of her choices of occupation and everything are kind of guided by that, at the same time that women are trying to leave those occupations to do more masculine things. And so it's a really interesting look at how, I think if you don't already know, and you should, but if you don't already know, I think the book really gets at the heart of the fact that all of this stuff is performance based on culture. And therefore the idea that we're policing something that is just a culture more that's just made up, and there shouldn't be a policing of this. Like, we ought to all be able to be free to like express ourselves however we wanted to, which would then take away the stigma on both sides. You could be whatever. You could be feminine and a man. You could be masculine and a woman. You could be anywhere in between. Hirshfeld said there were 43 million combinations of how you could be in the world, sex and gender wise. And like, that's the way, we just all like cared a lot less about it.
Again, leave people the fuck alone. Leanne Wilberg mentions the Danish girl Lily was played so well by Eddie Redmayne. Lily died because of a surgery. She wanted a uterus. That is correct. Yes.
Yeah, that is right. And it's really interesting too, because so Lily Elba is quite famous and Dora Richter is not. Christine Jorgensen is quite famous and Dora Richter is not. And I get asked about that, and none of you have asked it specifically, but I think it's kind of in the way we're talking about this. The reason is that Christine and Lily, they occupied a space that was like the exception that proves the rule. So people were willing to make exceptions for them because they were glamorous, they were well known, they were well supported. In fact, Lily claimed often that she was intersex, that she was not what was then called hermaphrodite, but what we now understand as intersex. That's not actually true. What is true is that Hirshfeld used to diagnose people as that all the time so that they could change their names on their birth certificates.
Wow.
So he would diagnose, he knew that they weren't, but he actually published a pamphlet making the category definition of what was then called hermaphrodism wider so that he included people who have, for instance, a man's body but a woman's soul.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
then
that's
he
one of
was
my
like,
favorite parts of the
now
book.
I have carte blanche to diagnose this to anyone I want to. And then the medical community recognized that, and it would allow them to go legally change their name, because otherwise you were not allowed to legally change your name on your birth certificate. And Lily and Dora both get a chance to do that. So I'm sure that he wrote that for them. At different times, probably prescribed that for them. Yeah, it is. Sareka says a genius move. It is.
It is a genius move.
It was
It is,
getting around things,
yeah.
but I do think that Lily wanted to have a surgery. She'd had a vaginoplasty, which so had Dora Richter, and then she wanted to have a uterine implant because she wanted to be a mother. And they did not. If you've read Mr. Humble and Dr. Butcher, you know just how late we figured out why organs were rejected. They didn't understand that back then, and she got sepsis as a result of the surgery and ended up dying.
David, what's up, dude?
So I want to make sure. Did Brandy, did you see Inez's question?
Yeah, Inez, Lindsay.
Oh,
did
no, I
Germany
didn't.
have
I'm
bodily
sorry.
autonomy laws or protections kind of similar to the U.S.?
Well, a very small number of people had autonomy over their bodies. So
Yeah.
essentially just men, and only if you were considered healthy. And because they thought anyone who was homosexual or transgender was somehow mentally sick. So autonomy there weren't a lot of places and a lot of people who had that in Germany at the time, or anywhere at the time, honestly, but particularly in Germany.
That goes to the thing that I want to say is that, like, what's interesting, what's so fascinating to me is that because they actually had to, and I think it's similar to today. It's not, you mentioned how like transvestites were arrested for disturbing the peace. There actually weren't any laws against them.
Right.
The Nazis had to create laws to police this.
Yeah.
And in the same way, there weren't always laws against this U.S. There had to be laws that were created against it. So to the point that we've always been at war with East Asia. We've always had these kind of norms. No, they had to be written.
They had to be made. Yeah. And the funny thing is, so I study the 18th century, and what's interesting is how much of what masculinity and femininity is gets codified at the very end of the 19th century, and we just accept like it's always been there. I'm like, no, it wasn't even there until then, not until almost the 20th century. And so, and it was born out of also economic. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff. This book, and we haven't even talked about the fact that the book is also a science history, and like it's quite a large history of science.
The great thing about this book, and again, I'm a fan. Like is that you open it not about the actual first chapter once you're done with the intro.
Yeah.
About chickens and castration and accepting and like them accepting like the body's just accepting new testes of chickens.
It's a lot of testicle talk.
There's a lot of
testicle talk.
The most funny thing to me, peculiars, I just have to say this. So the proper term is gonad.
Yes.
But like as a kid, that was like the wink, wink, nudge, nudge word.
Tee-hee.
Right. So I kept me sitting there I'm like, it feels real weird to keep typing gonad in a scientific document, And so so you're right. I talk about testicles a lot because it felt much weirder to be like, and then he got to the gonads. It just felt strange.
Yeah, exactly. But you open with that. And I think with that really, and it goes to this larger thing, because what you do and what I love about it is that it goes.
It was six roosters.
The six roosters, yes. You create, and I want to talk about this about writing, is that like you create a through line from the six roosters to the history of genetics to this idea that that being transgender is natural and homosexuality is natural. And I think that and I think you do that. You illustrate it's such elegant, right? Just to tell you, not just to blow smoke up your ass. It is such an elegant way you write and you draw that through line.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it, I mean, if you have to write about, chicken testicles and guinea pig gonads and crushed dog's testicles, you need to be eloquent about that.
Yes.
So we've come to that point in the show. You didn't think Brandy was going to get away without being quizzed. Eric, if you remember, it's a segment we do at the end of the show where I quiz the author. on something very tangential to their book. Do you remember what we did for your book when you were on?
I forget. Yeah, I forget. Remind me.
We quizzed you on rock and roll. We went
Yes,
heavy
okay,
into rock and roll. Yeah. So Brandy, there's a phrase you use a lot in the book, and you've even used it in this show. And it's the phrase "born this way."
Oh,
so
yep.
coincidentally, we are going to do another musical quiz. So,
Oh no.
inspired by the Lady Gaga song, which is a giant anthem for the community, "Born This Way." So we're going to do a quiz about some "Born This Way" kind of music. So
Okay.
the quiz this week, and the Peculiars, Brandy will help you out.
Good.
It's called "Baby, I Was Born This Way." So, a song that has become an inspiration to women, minorities, and the LGBTQ plus community. Lady Gaga's "Born This Way" is an anthem and what she considers her freedom song. The song is so powerful, she couldn't even imagine herself singing it and had to picture this legendary pop star singing it to get through it. Is it A, Mariah Carey, B, Whitney Houston, or C, Celine Dion?
Wow.
Who do you think Lady Gaga just pictures in her mind singing
I
this song?
I feel like if it were me and I had to picture somebody belting something, I'd go for Whitney, but that's me. That's me. I don't know. Sadie says C. Sadie says C. Rachel says B. Amanda says B. I'm gonna stick with my idea. I'm gonna stick with Whitney because I feel like there's a lot of in that, you know.
And the answer is, I watched this music video while I was researching all these questions. My God, this thing is powerful.
It is.
The answer is yes, Whitney Houston. That's who it takes to belt out "Born This Way." Of course, there is controversy with Madonna and her song, and there's a whole thing. And they do, hey, it's okay. It happens. It happens in music.
Yeah.
They're both great songs. That's the fun of it.
Both bangers, yes.
Yeah. All right. Question number 2. "I'm Coming Out," another anthem for the LGBTQ plus community, was recorded and performed by Diana Ross. It was written by Chic band members Bernard Edwards and Nile Rodgers, who were inspired by blank. Was it A, seeing Diana Ross perform as a solo artist, B, seeing the rise of openly gay performers, or C, drag queens dressed as Diana Ross at a New York nightclub?
I'm going to say C.
I hope it's C. I
Peculiars,
suspect it's A, but I hope it's C.
Again, I was like, was this that big of a hit? And then I pulled it up on YouTube. I was like, oh yeah, this is a dance party hit for sure. Everybody's guessing C. Lots of C's on
we're going with C. We're going with it.
All right. And I used this picture of Diana Ross specifically. This is an older picture from the 70s. The picture, like on the album, she has very 80s hair. I wanted to use this one specifically because, yes, it is drag queens dressed as Diana Ross at a New York nightclub.
That's great.
And they would be dressed
This is not new.
That's right. That's right. I love when people try to claim this kind of stuff as a fad. Nah.
Edwards and Rodgers were like, do you realize if like we write a song like this for her, like this will be an anthem for the whole community? Like it markets itself.
It makes money. This is the other thing that I say all the time. Yeah. This stuff makes money.
All right. Question number 3.
All right.
For "Born This Way."
2 by 2 right now.
Many big Hollywood directors get their start in music videos, and that's the case for legendary director David Fincher. Before he was making incredible films like Seven, Fight Club, and Zodiac, and directed some of the most iconic music videos for songs that resonate loudly with the LGBTQ plus community. Which of these music videos was not directed by David Fincher? A, Freedom by George Michael, B, A Little Respect by Erasure, or C, Express Yourself, there it is, by Madonna?
I'm going to
say, I do have to just point out here that Amanda Johnson says Brigham Young's son was a drag queen, which makes me happy.
Yes.
Now I'm thinking of Book of Mormon, so thank you for that one.
Okay, we got a lot of B's in here, and I don't really know on this one. I really don't.
I use this question. I use the not question just as an excuse to slide in 3 more, bangers, 3 more anthems for the community.
Yes.
Like this is just my excuse to highlight 3 more songs. But yeah.
Oh, boy. So we're gonna say that B is the one that was not
directed by David Fincher.
All right, I'm going with you guys. I'm trusting you guys. I'm trusting my peculiars.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
A little respect is not.
Oh,
Freedom.
right.
These are two just legendary hits for Fincher.
I love Freedom. That's such a
and
great song.
Express
Now I want to go
Yourself.
downstairs and sing it in my karaoke bar.
I know,
no,
right?
that song's a banger.
I was wondering. I bet Mark could probably. I bet both of you could probably pull off the George Michael look from that music video.
We probably
Yeah.
could.
Yeah, I
We
bet both
probably
of you
could.
could. So there you
We
go,
would- we
Brandy.
would handle it.
Good job, Peculiars. And yeah,
The Peculiars were the only reason I got the last one. 'Cause
Yeah.
I didn't know.
I mean, by the fifth or sixth time I heard "Born This Way" in the book, I was like, well, I at least got to go listen to the song, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
it is a
no,
great song. It is.
Respect,
But you know,
respect.
what I think is so fabulous about, I want to say this because I think it's really important. When Hirschfeld, when he realizes, and this is part of the science, right? He's led to this through science, through this discovery of hormones. He realizes that you can be born a certain way, and of course genetics kind of backs that up too. But the other thing that he noticed, and I love this, is that you could be born away, but that there was also a lot of flex. So like, for instance, he understood that sometimes people are like, think they're heterosexual, and then they're like, actually no, maybe I'm bisexual, and then they're like, actually no, I think maybe I'm lesbian. Like there was this movement, and he recognized that every place you were on that spectrum was valid in the moment that you were experiencing it. And I think that's something that can sometimes get lost in the dialogues today, which is that
I loved that part because
Yeah.
I think it's funny because I know that you're non-binary, and it's funny because I kind of had this kind of sheepish question. One of my really good friends is Joe Yurkaba, who's a reporter at NBC News, and I was joking, and I asked them really ignorant. I knew them before they came in as non-binary, so sometimes that happens. But forgive me. But like the funny thing is, we were hanging out one time. We were in Texas, and I was like, look, Joe, I know that like for bi people, like there's this idea, oh, bisexual people aren't real,
yeah,
like,
you get that a
I
lot.
was
Yeah.
like, is that a thing with non-binary people? They told me, yeah, it is. And so one of the things I love about Hirschfeld is that and one of the reasons why he deserves more love is that, and I'm glad this book gives him his due and exposes his flaws, and I think his flaws make him even more lovable.
Yeah.
Is that he says this is valid, that this is important, and this is legitimate, and there's
it's that sense of legitimacy, which I think, gosh, as somebody who has been up and down and sideways in the medical community and feels like, frequently the medical systems don't want to give you, the patient, any legitimacy over your body, particularly if you're somebody in a assigned female at birth body. To have him say, no, you're legitimate. I mean, at one point, and this was really impactful to me, they were trying to decide that basically it was one of these other court cases where they were trying to decide whether somebody could change their name. And they said, well, what matters most? Is this person a woman or a man? And Hirschfeld was, did you ask them? Like how they feel about themselves and their body is what makes it real, because he really trusted people to know themselves. And Sadie says, yeah, bi erasure is real as well. But I think it's that, like Sareka says, that flex is precisely why haters hate. Like these people who aren't going to with the growth mentality, like they don't want there to be flex. They're scared of change. They're scared they might change, but in fact, it's such a wonderful way to look at the world and realize that when you have an experience and you're 7, it's true to you as a 7-year-old. When you have an experience and you're a teenager, it's true to you as a teenager. When you have an experience as an adult, we recognize that, but somehow we don't allow that to also be true of these other aspects of life, and it's just, yeah. Oh, that's nice, Amanda. Amanda said they don't want to carry the mental load that change requires. Oh, burn.
That's
Yes.
really good. And this goes to the thing that I really want to talk about. You and I talked about this offline, or we were texting earlier today. And I know that, like you said, a lot of the tour hasn't been what you hoped it would be. I
will say Missoula was awesome.
Shout out to Missoula.
Shout out to Missoula. That was great.
But like what I want to do, but I don't want this to be, I don't want this to come off as whiny or things like that. But I think it could be instructive. Like I think I want to take this because one of the things that was so great about this was that in the book you talk about there was a publisher who allowed, who proliferates the spreading of enables the proliferation of Oscar Wilde's books translated into German
and Hirschfeld's books
and Hirschfeld's books, things like that. And I feel like, and then what happens, of course, there's a chilling effect. And I feel like we're seeing the same thing now, where we're seeing with the rollback of DEI, where we're seeing the rollback of ship names. I saw somebody mention the
ship name. I know.
You see, there was a whole controversy about Jackie Robinson. There was a whole thing about Jackie Robinson being removed from the Pentagon's website. And I think that's what I don't want. I don't want people to interpret this as you complaining, but what I do want this to be is that yes, and so a lot of times change starts up here and then it goes up here, but also culture and a chilling effect can come down from the top. And I feel like we're in one of those moments now, if you want to talk about that.
It's complicated, because on one hand, huge shout out to my publisher, Norton, W.W. Norton and Company, who carried not just my book, but Daniel Brooks' book, which is The Einstein of Sex, which is specifically a biography of Hirschfeld, whereas mine is a little bit more of a cultural history and a scientific history. But, they stood up and they said, yeah, we're not just going to take one, we're going to take two. And there's been amazing independent bookshops that have hosted me, that have had me come on site. I had a wonderful event in New York that was held at an art gallery that was awesome, and it had musicians come in and they performed songs about the book. I had another wonderful event at the my brain just went, but it's a big Jewish foundation. It's a German society. Anyway, it was great too, also in New York. It's not like I've had bad events, but one of the things that has been really apparent is that some of the legacy media, some of the places that would normally carry my books are kind of like, kind of not wanting to, and you can see why. It's potentially a hot button. It's potentially divisive. But it shouldn't be. So, what I hope for, I guess, is that this book remains. I wrote it to be a kind of an archival book, a book that you could get all the information in one place about a lot of things that are fringe and edge. I had to go to the fringes and edges to find the information. But the other thing that I hope this book does is, to me, it's a Star Wars story, right? So the Empire does strike back. The Nazis do come. But we have sent off the Death Star plans already, because when they came for the Institute in 1933 and they burned those books, a lot of stuff had already made it out. People had made it out. Dora had made it out. And she lived to a ripe old age. She lived into her 70s.
She died in 1965 or something.
Yeah, she could have known who the Beatles were. But it's this wonderful way in which we have the publications, and all this material might have been hard to find, but we could find it. And why could we find it? Because you can trace a kind of direct lineage between things like the Kinsey Institute and Hirschfeld, or some of the earliest homosexual rights movements in the United States and Europe back to Hirschfeld. And so you realize that while it seems dark, it survives. It survives, and we come back. And so we are all in the rebel alliance, and we feel bad. There are days when you feel so sad and bad and overwhelmed, but pick up your lightsaber, baby. This is who we are. We're going to fight that darkness. And just by being your authentic self, you are fighting the darkness. And I think that's probably the most important thing. Dora fought darkness by being this joyful, true to herself. And because joy is a weapon. It's a weapon because they don't have it.
And I think that I don't know how many people in the chat have watched Andor yet. I finished watching it last month. I went on vacation. I finally got a chance to watch it. There's that line where Luthen says, "You're going to lose, and you're going to lose, and you're going to lose, and you're going to lose." And rebellions, and I remember one time, Barney Frank, who was a congressman from Massachusetts, one of the first openly gay congressmen, he said, if you go to a protest and you feel good about it, it's probably the least effective thing. And I think that in the same way, there's going to be times where it's going to be really hard fucking work. Mm-hmm. But you do it and you keep it, and like I said, because I think, and this is, again, why I see this book as a book about hope. I understand, because I've been to the hall, again, I live in Washington, D.C. I've been to the Holocaust Memorial multiple times, more times than I want to admit. And everybody's seen that image of Hirshfeld's books getting, thrown into the heap of books being burned and things like that. He's named publicly public enemy #1, all that stuff. But I think what I want to say and why I felt weirdly hopeful about this book is, as you said, it's not the end of this. It's not the beginning or the end of the story. And I think that's the most important thing.
And we're in the story. It's
Yes.
not only not the beginning or the end of the story, it's still the same story. And we now get to tell our part of it. And I know that we're going to stand up for what's right. I know that all the peculiars are going to stand up for the right thing. I just know that because if you're weird, you're family, and that's where you are, right? And there are hard days. As she said a few years ago, before the book was published, just mentioning the research you were doing, you got trolled and harassed. Is that still happening? No, because I left Twitter.
Yes.
Yeah, that stuff's still out there. I got chased off. Basically, J.K. Rowling's. Every time she does something dumb, hundreds of people send her my articles, so she hates me, and so she sent a bunch of her stands after me on Twitter, and that was one of the bad things. And MTG, what is it with people in acronym name? No.
I think I actually have some responsibility for that, because what had happened was that the weekend of CPAC, I think this is what triggered you and I having that conversation over Medium and Substack.
Yeah.
I had flagged that MTG had been saying a lot of stuff about autism and transgender people.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then I basically did an interview for Washington Post where I didn't throw her under a bus. There was a bus, there was MTG. Anyway, but like I talked about the fact that she was aping Nazi protocols by trying to call every gay and trans person a pedophile, and she didn't like that. So
I got in trouble with her team when I pointed out that, like, she was talking about HIAS, which is the Jewish refugee organization group here in the United States, and using almost the same rhetoric as the Pittsburgh shooter. And I got blackballed by her team for a bit, and I had to.
So, I'm not on Twitter anymore, so I don't really see a lot of that stuff. There's still clapbacks, but no one shot at me. So, that seems good. And I think that this is a story that is going to matter to to the right people. You know what I mean? Because one of the things I said this to a group of teenagers and high school kids at one of the events that I did, where I said, you might not be out there carrying a sign. You might feel like, oh, I'm not part of this. You are, though. You are, because you are you being authentic, and you are pursuing truth and joy and justice. And that makes you part of the right side of history. And so I think that if you read this book, just remember that you're owed some joy and you're owed some happiness, and it's right and it's good. And that that you matter, that everything you do, just being yourself, that alone is powerful, and they will never, ever overcome that.
This is the last. I don't know how much, Davey, how
we kind of have to. We got to wrap it up.
So I was gonna. Yeah, this is the last thing.
Brandy and Eric can talk all night. I'm the one that has a babysitter.
That's true. Well, it has been such a pleasure to talk to you, Eric, and to talk to all of you. And you guys have asked great questions. I hope I got all of them. You guys can send me questions anywhere, anytime. You know where to find me, heavens. So do, and it has just been a pleasure that I could share this book with you, because you're my people. So thank you.
And I'm just just if I could be a little sappy, the fact that you could have a cishet, boring vanilla guy moderate your discussion for a very important book, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I know that you were kind of trusting with a live in the hands. I hope that this was a good experience for you. I wanted to roll out the red carpet for you, and for all the peculiars, I love you. I'm one of you. So thank you so much for giving me this honor.
And also, this was an amazing cocktail, Kathleen. This one was really good. I loved it. So
right,
thank
Brandy,
you all.
close us out.
Big love, big hugs, and thank you for joining us at a place where, if you're weird, you're family.
You got the blue bottle blues when you wake up in the night. Don't make a big mistake, 'cause you can never make it right. When you reach out for the vial, feel the ridges in the glass. It's a matter of survival, baby, better watch your back. antidote.